Hey guys, thanks again for tuning into the Freedom Formula podcast. So today's episode is a conversation between Steven and I. Steven works on the Made This Franchise team and he's the host of the Made This Franchise internal podcast. So we have an internal podcast just for franchisees where we dive into sensitive information, tactics, numbers, interview franchisees, things like that. When Steven and I were recording an episode for the internal podcast, we realized that, hey, this is a great episode and great content to release externally as well, because we go over really interesting topics which I wanted to share with you guys here as well. So this episode today is a conversation between Steven and I with a variety of different topics. I hope you guys enjoy.
So, Neel, what are some of the dirty secrets of franchising?
Man, it's funny. I just wrote a thread about this. It's fun. I actually recently talked to Dan Andrews on the Tropical MBA podcast. So we did an interview yesterday and he's like, oh, tell me the financials and how this works. And I was walking through, he's like, oh, this sounds like a gravy train. This is great. And I was like, dude, not at all. Here's some dirty secrets about franchising. So most times people think when you franchise, it's like an extension of your business, right? A lot of people have their own small business and they're like, cool, let me franchise it out. And that's a great way of expansion. That's like telling someone like, oh, I'm really good at making hot dogs. Let me be a life coach for people who want to make hot dogs. You know, like it's completely
Right.
different. So number one big mistake is like, it's an extension of your existing business, which it's not. It's a completely different business.
Not true.
Yeah, not true at all. The other thing I think people don't realize is that the initial fee is not a profit center. It covers the cost to help franchisees grow. A lot of people look at that fat fee and think, oh, that's great. Like you could pocket that. That's
Neil's going to Bora Bora on that money.
yeah, yeah, ramen noodle money, exactly. But it's not the initial fee. I mean, like I do think there's brands who probably take the initial fee and pocket it, but the truth is that initial fee should go towards supporting operations, supporting that franchisee to get launched. The real money comes eventually with the royalties. Now, the royalties, there's a whole concept in franchising called royalty self-sufficiency. At what stage do your royalties pay for all of the overhead? I didn't know this when getting into franchising, but that number is like closer to 50 franchise units. Obviously, every model differs, like what your office have to look like, all that kind of good stuff. But you know, it takes a while to get there. So you're kind of banking on the long-term play of your franchisees being successful for the real long-term sustainable money. That's kind of where it comes from. People from the outside might not know that.
So selling a bunch of franchises, that's really only half of it. If half of those franchises die off, then the chance of you building that runway diminishes.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was just, and that is a play people do. Like there was I won't say the name of the brand, but there was a installation brand for franchising. So 300 units in 1 year. 300. When I hear that, I think there's no freaking way they're qualifying everyone. There's no way. Guess what? They sold to private equity for a bunch of money. And guess what? They have probably 10 to 15% year-over-year closures happening now, right?
Wow.
So there is a thing in franchising, which is why sometimes it has a dirty rap where there's like franchise sales organizations and brokers who are the middlemen, and they don't mind. They get a cut of the franchise fee. So they're shipping as many sales as they can for a brand. Then the brand is left dealing with the franchisees who maybe are not a good fit for what they're actually doing in the system. And that's kind of like why franchising sometimes gets a bad rap, is there's bad players in there. Versus like, for example, like Steven, you know what we're doing. Like we've had 4,000 leads for Made This. We're not trying to sell them all. We're actively turning them away, being like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, here's all the bad stuff. You gotta look into this, right? Therefore, the people who are coming in, like I feel confident, like number one, I like them. They're hungry, you know, they have the hustle mentality, they have the resources, the right expectations. Like that's what I'm betting on, right? Is the individuals, the franchisees coming in. But the dirty secret of the franchise world is a lot of the deals in the fast growth companies are made by franchise brokers, franchise sales organizations, and that initial fee is not a profit center, despite what a lot of people want it to be.
Well, and going back to your hot dog vendor, analogy, I sell hot dogs. Now I'm going to be a life coach for. There's really a secondary test here is, hey, you may have been good at being a hot dog vendor, but maybe you're no good as a hot dog, life coach.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is, and this is real, there are many franchisors who probably should have never started a franchise.
100%.
In the sense of they were perfectly good at, little business owner doing their thing, killing it, making a lot of money. And someone told them, you should do this, or they read a lot of Reddit articles or
Yep.
something. But they didn't have the skill set, nor were they willing to seek formation to build the skill set to become a franchisor. And as so you're alluding to, it's an entirely separate business. And what got you here won't get you there. You have to, in a sense, rebuild the way that you think about your business. And I think of like your brain being separated into I am a franchisee of Made This Los Angeles. I am a franchisor in charge of all franchisees. And reminding yourself that the things that work for you and the scale that you're able to build in LA does not apply to Johnny franchisee who started last week. And you have to remember that, like the franchisee brain, Neel Los Angeles, I cannot necessarily put that expectation down as the franchisor.
No, nailed it. Nailed it. And it's like, I think for people who want to start a franchise operation, you have to think, do I like operating? Am I an operator? Do I want to do everything myself? Like, do I enjoy that? If so, I think you should self-expand, right? There's like two models you can think about when you expand your local business. Starbucks owns all of their locations. Every single one of them is corporate owned versus McDonald's, where it's all franchised. Those are kind of two ways of thinking about it. And depending who you are, pick one or the other. I know operators who decided to franchise and they don't provide great support because they're like, why don't these people do what I'm doing? Just like do that, you know? Versus, I think, in my opinion, they probably should have just continued expanding themselves because they would have liked it more. So the type of people who should franchise, who might like it, like supporting franchisees, like building a coaching program, like building a support system, that type of person would do pretty well with having a franchise organization.
You've had more coaching than many entrepreneurs that I know.
Mm.
All entrepreneurs who are successful have had some kind of coaching in their life.
Mm.
But I feel like Neel has a selection of coaches. It's like, well, I've got this coach, I've got this coach, I've got this
Yep.
coach. Do you feel like having had all that coaching has helped you think about, because you just alluded to it, like, oh, I've watched these coaches, and so then I brought that into what I'm doing.
Yep.
But do you think like being a coachee has helped you develop your own voice as a coach?
100%, like by far, because you realize what's worked on you and then you could use it on other people to some extent. Like I'll give you an example. The first coach I ever used was a cleaning company coach. His name is Mike, back in 2016, first coach. And I remember going to him and I'm like, dude, Mike, I'm so pissed because this customer wants a refund. Doesn't deserve a refund. I'm not going to give it to him. Like, I'm not going to give it. Like, I'm going to stand on my morals. I'm not going to do it. And he's like, Neel, do you want to be right or do you want to be rich? And I was like,
Such a great line.
rich.
Such a great line.
I've used that line a bunch of times with all the franchisees, right? Because for me, it was just like, damn, you're right. Like, all right, just let it go. Let it go.
That's your
on.
ego. That's your personal ego, and a business owner has to go over that ego.
Yeah.
To get to the next level.
Yeah. And I think I would have learned that lesson, but it would have taken me way longer to learn the lesson where maybe later I'm like, all right, I'm losing a lot of money because I'm letting my ego get in the way versus someone telling me and me being receptive to listening expedited that. So all those little lessons like are kind of like padded in the back. And I'm not saying I'm like the best coach. In fact, I'm probably not. We have like guys like Dan and Jenny who are way better than me. But it kind of allows you to understand what is needed to help a franchisee succeed. Right. And it's not just the tactic. It's not just like doing it. And Stephen, you know, the analogy like I always use now is climbing Everest. Right. So like, let's say I did Everest Base Camp last May with my wife and we hired a Sherpa, right? His name is Govinda, absolute badass. Now, if we went there and Govinda's like, guess what? Hey, I'm going to carry you up the mountain all the way to base camp. Just hop on my back and we're going to piggyback ride there. Like, did I really do base camp? You know, like, did I actually get the benefit? Like, I guess I got to the top, but like, would I feel proud saying like, oh, hey, I actually got to base camp? Like, absolutely not, right? Versus him saying, hey, look, I'm going to guide you. You're not doing it yourself, but like, you know, you got to get the right hiking boots. Like, you know, you go to these tea houses, I'll negotiate rates for you. Let me make it a little bit easier, but you still have to freaking hike. That's like kind of the analogy I use with franchising is a franchisor can't do all the stuff. They can't put you on your back and bring you up to Everest. That's the goal of what you're doing here, but they can make it easier for you. They can navigate you through the different trails. They could navigate you up the hill. They could, you know, make sure you don't fall somewhere off the cliff. That's kind of what a franchise system does.
Because, you know, people might say, oh, we're getting tired of, you know, Neel just businessing out all the time. So I am going to come back to business, but I want to pause for a moment. I want to come to Africa, but before we come to Africa, I want to talk about a concept you talked about recently, and we talked about earlier today, which is the life bank account concept.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that for people? And I think then that allows us to directly come into Africa.
Yeah, I mean, So the life bank account concept, I realized a few months ago, I had a lot of meetings. Like people would say, "Hey, can we hop on a call?" And I'd hop on a call and look at my calendar, and like a bunch of time was taken up with meetings. And I started thinking, like, okay, well, this is a lot of hours. And I went on this existential crisis, and I was like, how many hours do I have left of living? Right. So, Stephen, I'm 36 right now. Let's pretend I die at 80. Like average life expectancy US right now is like 78, but whatever, technology and stuff, I die at 80. So I was like, okay, I have like 392,000 hours, somewhere around there. It's like that's a lot of hours, right? Then I started saying, okay, well, actually, 8 of those hours I'm sleeping. 8 of those hours I'm
Ideally.
ideally, yeah, 8 of those hours I'm just like kind of working. So I really have like 8 discretionary hours of the day to do stuff. But those 8 discretionary hours, like there's commuting, there's errands, there's cooking, there's random stuff. So actually, like I kind of have like 4 hours to myself in the day, really. And so then I back math that and I was like, dude, wait, I actually only have like 68,000 hours left of that discretionary time, which maybe sounds like a lot. But then I was like, okay, Neil, what if you think about this like money? Like pretend in your bank account, Stephen, you only had $68,000 left. And someone would come up to you and be like, hey, can you give me $5? And you're like, yeah, sure. Like, here, so here's $5. Like, let me dish out these dollars, right? You wouldn't do that if you only had $68,000 left. And it's not
If you
like
knew that when that bank account went to zero, you were gone.
you're gone. Like when that bank account goes to zero, there's no like overdraft protection. You don't declare bankruptcy. You don't like get a loan. There's none of that kind of stuff. It's like completely gone. So it's kind of shocking how easily people just dish out their hours either to social media. Like, have you looked at your screen time? I looked at my screen time recently and it was like 3.5 hours a day. And I was like, what am I doing on my phone for 3.5 hours? I'm dishing out these life bank account hours. So I realized that concept. I'm like, holy crap, like I'm really giving away all this money, quote unquote, which is like hours, which is worth more. Why am I doing this? Right. And I think that kind of clarifies and says a little bit more like, well, you don't have that much time to do. So be more precious with the time. Don't take the meetings you don't need to. Slim up what you're doing. Work on what you want to do now. And Stephen, on top of that, the hours are not equal. Like the hours of when I'm 75 to 80 years old are probably not equal to the hours I am right now when I am more active and I'm able to go out and do stuff, right? It's weighted earlier. Um, so that's another concept we got to think about is how do you maximize your time now? Because it's not equal throughout your life.
Two reflections on that, Neil. One, years ago, I was in Dubrovnik in Croatia, and that is the scene for King's Landing in Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching these elderly people, God bless them, struggling to climb the walls, and it's not a difficult climb.
Yep.
But I was there, I was in my 20s or 30s at the time, and I thought, wow, there is a lesson right there. Like they waited and now they're struggling. I'm sure they still had a wonderful time, and I'm not trying to take that away from them. But they waited until then.
Yep.
And what could have happened? The same way I recently saw on YouTube a couple complaining about how their Antarctica cruise didn't actually go to Antarctica, to the continent. And they said that there were people who'd been saving for 10 years
Oh my
and they
God.
went and the cruise didn't deliver,
Yeah.
right? And that goes again to your concept of the life bank account and the idea of doing what you want to do now. Are you sure that you'll be able to do that thing that you want to do in the future,
Yep.
right? That you're saving for. And are you not concerned that by building that up, right? So I wanted to do Everest Base Camp. When you did it, it pushed it up on my thing about 5 years.
No way.
So I
Oh,
think, yeah, well, because I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna go in that dangerous and infelicitous phrase of someday, right? Well, I was like, no, Neil did it. There's no reason I can't do it sooner. And I was like, I'm going to do it in the next 5 years from when
nice.
Neil did it.
Very cool.
And it was just a question of sometimes it's the sounds around you that help push you forward,
Definitely.
right? Sometimes it's your spouse. And that is why Neil finds himself in Rwanda. You're like, there's this digital nomad thing. And you're like, dude, I was digital nomading when you were learning cursive, right? So now that you are in Rwanda and in a sense digital nomading, you've not been doing that for a while. You've been stable in Los Angeles. You've still been traveling. That's true. But you've been in a stable environment after starting your made this career
Hmm.
on the road. What's different now for you? And then in general, and then I want to get down into what's different in Africa.
Yeah. Um, So I started the whole digital nomad journey in 2015, and I was traveling very aggressively until probably COVID time. Slow down from there, still kind of did stuff here and there. Met my wife, she's a big traveler too, so we would still go to different places and do different things, but it was a little bit different at that time, right? I had my own apartment in LA. I was kind of back and forth, so I wasn't just backpack solo travel, like I'm out, I'll catch you guys whenever. So it felt a little bit different in terms of an identity shift. So right now, like people say, are you still doing digital nomad stuff? I'm like, I guess so. I feel like I'm just kind of living now. It's like I probably travel a lot still in comparison to, living in LA or other people, but it feels different. I wouldn't call myself of like a backpacker digital nomad. And it's funny, Stephen, I kind of like, there's a sense of nostalgia that I kind of like miss the hostel and hammock days where you're just like so excited about a new destination, and it's like there's a nostalgia factor to it, which I feel is missing right now. And I don't know if that's because I've just traveled enough and I've kind of grown out of it. I don't know if it's like an age thing as well, but there's definitely like that nostalgia feeling of travel, which is funny to say because I'm like spending 6 months in Africa doing like more adventurous stuff now than I ever was. But still, like I guess it's a mindset or like how you view things in concept. Like back then, straight out of corporate, when I was traveling, everything felt novel, everything felt adventurous, and it's like chasing the dragon. Like I guess you get desensitized to that because you experience it enough. And now I'll still do more crazy stuff. Like I just hiked over to Uganda, right? And going through villages, just like a water bottle and a phone. I'm like, all right, I'll figure this out. And it's very adventurous, and I loved it. But it didn't feel like, I don't know, it didn't feel like how it would be 10 years ago, right? It's just like kind of a day and age for that.
Well, I mean, part of it was, your recent Uganda video. I was like, Neil's gonna get killed, because I one of my YouTube obsessions from years ago. I haven't followed any videos lately. Were these two Dutch girls
Hmm.
who were hiking somewhere and then they got lost and murdered.
Oh,
And I was
geez.
like, oh no. But thankfully, since Neil posted this video, I know he doesn't get murdered at the end. But it could easily have gone poorly, and I think you probably had some training, whether you realize it consciously or no, that helped you deal with that situation. Like you knew that the guy hitting you, quote unquote,
Yep.
hitting you, was like not nice, but you did not react in a scared manner, even though you may have thought like, oh no, this is not good.
Yep.
And that helped you get out of that situation. So
But
any just on that just on that Uganda hike, any lessons from that, Neil?
man, I'll tell you the exact story. So my wife and I decided we were in North Rwanda, and we're like, oh, Uganda's like, I look on the map, it's so close. Like, how cool would it be if we just like walked across the border? Because like we're in the middle of nowhere. So like, okay, let's give this a shot, right? So we set off in the morning, backpack, protein bar, water. We're going through all these villages, right? And first of all, everyone's like so friendly, everyone's coming out, and Rwanda is the safest country in Africa. Like by ranking, it's the safest. So I didn't feel worried already because I'm like, I'm in Rwanda. It's a very safe country. As we crossed to Uganda, though, it took us a while to get there. We got lost. People were helping us. We crossed over the border, and two guys approached me, and pretty much confronted me. And I realized, like, dude, these guys are hammered. Like, they're middle of the day, very drunk. But there's different types. Like, Steven, you and I know this. Like, some people are like, you're not normally drunk. You're like, you happen to be going out and you're drunk. And then some people who are like, you're a lifelong,
Habitually drunk.
you are an alcoholic, right? Like, and there's a different type of sense. So I was like, okay, these guys are pretty messed up, and I could tell. Um, and what happened was, I was like, all right, we got to get out of here. There's only one bridge to cross back to Rwanda. The guy cut in front of me and blocked the bridge, and wouldn't let me pass. And I didn't want to take money out. He wanted money. But the problem is, everyone's around looking at the situation unfold, right? If I pull out my wallet and give this guy money, like now I already know I'm not going to be in a
You
great
already learned
situation.
the candy problem earlier in the trip.
Exactly. Like and this would be an example. Like I might not have known that 10 years ago, but you kind of know, like you pull out your wallet, you better know what's going to happen, right? So I knew, like, look, I can't pull out my wallet. It's not a great situation here. These guys are lifelong alcoholics. We could outrun them. Like that was kind of my thought process. So I was just like, okay, as long as I could get my wife across the creek, we'll be okay. We could book it. Like I'm not too scared. These guys, they don't have knives. They're not like, one of the guys was bigger than me, and his fist was really big, and he was the one who punched me. But besides that, I was like, I'm not too worried about these guys. Like push them, get away, we'll be okay. Versus like, yeah, I guess if you're early stage in traveling, like, what's going on? He wants money. Where's the authorities? Who do I talk to? In that situation, I'm like, dude, no authority's gonna help me here. Like, you're in a border. Like,
You just crossed the border. You just crossed the unguarded border crossing. Where do you think the authorities are
exactly.
there?
So you kind of know, like, you got to get out of here as quick as you can. Most people here are good. No one's gonna hurt you. Just these two guys are kind of off the rocker. Let's just get out of here. So those type of situations, you kind of like, with enough travel and enough situations, you understand what you're in and how to get out of it. So we got out of that situation, and it was all good.
So, moral of the story is when hiking near unguarded border crossings, don't necessarily approach people who look drunk.
Yes, that is moral of the story.
So last time we spoke, you shared some things about Africa, and today we're in a co-working space. You've got solid internet. What are some of the other things that you've had a chance to notice? And I remember the last time we talked, you had just had some Mexican food prepared for you. Have you started to ease into the local cuisine, local culture a bit? How's that working out?
Yeah, a bit. So I've been here a month and a half now, and living in Rwanda. There's like, first of all, it's freaking awesome. Like, truly, it's like it's a very stable, developed country, especially in Kigali. So there's a lot of really cool coffee shops, a lot of great restaurants. There's like five-star dining. There's a lot of things you would not expect. What's been,
Can you tell us a bit about prices? Like if
yeah,
you say
sure.
five-star dining, how much am I going to spend to do a five-star dining? How
So
much am I going to spend at a coffee shop?
yeah, I would probably say maybe not as cheap as you think, but maybe 50% of the price of LA. Like if I go to a coffee shop
Okay.
and get like a nice coffee, it's probably going to be, $2 US. Um,
Wow.
which is
And am I paying in cash or am I doing
so
contactless?
it's interesting. They over here they use something called Momo Pay, which is all mobile payment. So in the U.S. we're built off a credit card infrastructure. That's how the U.S. works. That's how a lot of developed countries work. Over here, because also people didn't have loans, bank accounts, credit scores, that doesn't exist here, right? So
They just skipped over
they
that.
skipped over that whole development cycle and it went straight to mobile money. So you have to load money on your phone number, to be as if your phone number, you have money on it, you could send it to people through your mobile device. I
Amazing.
know.
Amazing.
It is interesting because one fascinating part
Is
about
that more, is that how people pay normally or do they pay cash? Or they normally
mostly
do
mobile
mobile
pay,
pay?
mostly mobile
Wow,
pay.
that's amazing.
Yeah, everywhere, mobile pay. What's fascinating though is I was at this coffee shop and I saw this I saw a guy there. He looked like Silicon Valley white guy. I don't know, 45, 50 years old. Like tech guy, like talking to everyone, high energy and stuff. I was like, this guy is clearly an entrepreneur. And so I went up to him. I was like, hey, I heard you talk about entrepreneur stuff. Like, what do you do? And he runs a tech incubator in Rwanda. And I was like, oh, interesting. Why are you not doing this in the US? You're American. Like, why did you come here? And he started explaining about the opportunity that exists in Rwanda. And in the US, let's say, Stephen, you want to reinvent the way things are done. Most things are baked in. Amazon runs the cloud storage. Everything's credit card based. You're not going to reinvent the payment system. Like it's pretty well set. Even Apple didn't reinvent the payment system. They just added Apple Pay on top of credit card systems. Like it is built as it is. And you could just kind of iterate on top of what's already there, but not exactly. More developing countries like this, you have a chance to actually invent the way the system is created, which I didn't even think about that it's possible. You could reinvent the way the money system is created. Right now, it's Momo Pay based off the telecoms. At some point,
There is no Starbucks, there is no Haagen-Dazs, there is no basket. You can be those things
you could
in
you could get in
Rwanda.
on the ground floor. So, like for example, telecom, um, it's not going to be here all the time, right? Like, let's say Starlink comes and the whole payment system is based off the telecom. Now what, right? You could reinvent the way things are done. I met this 21-year-old entrepreneur yesterday at the co-working space. He's trying to start cloud storage, like for AI models for LLMs, things like that. In the US, you're like, what are you talking about? Like that's already been done. Like Amazon controls the space, Google controls the space. There are no servers here for that. And the companies which do exist for that here aren't that great. So he's trying to build that infrastructure here. So because it's 10 to 15 years behind the times, you could actually get in on the ground floor and build stuff. So if you're highly innovative, there's a lot of opportunity if that's what you want to do.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Just on the logistics of Momo Pay, is it a QR code? Like, is there a PIN, or do you just flash something and it pays
No,
out?
you mean you do like you literally type in star 182 star and then one to send money pound, and then you put in their phone number and how much you want to pay. You put in your PIN code, and it sends it out.
Wow,
Interesting.
wow, wow, wow. It's funny because everyone looks to America. I remember one time using Apple Pay in Tunisia in front of a Tunisian friend, and they were just their brain
Hmm.
exploded. They're like, "Wow," you know. And we think, "Oh, that's really cool." And then you tell me about this, like what people don't realize is that opens up life to the unbanked.
Hmm.
So many people in America, they're unbanked. They cannot get a debit card. They cannot get a credit card, which means they can't use Apple Pay.
Right.
Um, Now, obviously, I suppose they could get a prepaid debit card or whatever, but you still have to be able to load it. What you're talking about is I just have a telephone. I'm loading it that way. I can go somewhere to a kiosk, give them money, and then like it loads up on my card. So it's a perfect example of Americans sometimes being complacent
Yep.
and not realizing, what's going on. So thank you for that uh, brief snapshot of Africa. I'm going to come back to it the next time that we talk. I want to wrap up by talking about the behind the scenes, a little pull back the curtain. What is Neel working on behind the scenes as the franchisor of Mavis?
Yeah. Yeah. That's like a big part of the day is figuring out how to make the best mousetrap within the Made This system. So currently what we're working on is we're testing out a lot of ways of getting new leads for franchisees. We talked about you have to do digital marketing, you have to do community marketing. What alternate ways are doing that if the basic ways, the low hanging fruit ways aren't working, right? So we've been testing out two new cold email vendors. Candidly, both have been flops so far, which is fine, right? We're testing. That's what we're doing. We're setting up a cold calling vendor. We tried one so far, has not worked. We're going to try another, trying to crack the code with cold outbound. We're testing a lot of new software. So we've gone through probably 8 vendor pitches of different software. Right now, the way we have it is residential's on one platform, Airbnb's on the other. We're trying to figure out a way of combining it for franchisees. So working a lot on that. Testing a lot of meta vendors. So we have a concept called the honeypot, which a lot of people know, which is we devote money to test vendors in franchisees markets for them. So we're testing meta vendors right now, and we're testing car wrap vendors as well. It's a lot of testing vendors at the moment, and also trying to create a marketing dashboard. So marketing dashboard means what if we knew from all locations what's the cost per lead and the cost per acquisition on Thumbtack? What if we knew that for LSA? What if we knew that for all locations? We could go to everyone and say, guys, like definitively, this tactic works. It's a cheat code, right? And that's what we're trying to build is how do you make this the biggest cheat code that no one else can get? That type of data. So we're trying to centralize a lot of that data right now too.
Just getting a little nerdier there, Neel. How are you finding these vendors?
Combination of either franchise contacts, combination of putting out on Twitter, like I'm looking for vendors. Whoever wins head to head gets to be the preferred vendor for all of our locations, and people will bid, right? And I just straight up tell them, you're competing against someone else in 2 different franchise markets. Whichever one is doing better and has a better ROI for franchisees is going to win. And then, of course, we can negotiate with them as well.
It's a great incentive for everybody because they know it's performance based
Hmm.
and you feel good about the fact that you put them through their paces. You didn't just award them a contract. You said, hey, you're going to have to do this.
Yep, yep. And we're putting our money behind it too, right? To test it out so franchisees aren't completely out of the hole. We actually front franchisor money for this.
Step back one in the meta journey of being a franchisor. What stage do you feel like you're in right now?
Still, franchise staging is interesting. Until you're at 50 units, they call you an emerging franchise, which
Okay,
is
so you're still emerging.
still emerging, which is crazy because I've been doing this for 4 years now, but still in the emerging phase is what I would say. But I think we know what we're doing, right? Things are battle tested. We have the team. We know what works. We know what doesn't work. So I feel like we're kind of in a very cool spot where we could still be very agile because things are not set in stone at the moment. They're very iterative. We don't have a crazy amount of franchisees, meaning we could actually change software quickly. We could do other things and grow really, really fast. It's kind of a fun time where we know what we're doing, but there's still room for improvement and we could iterate really fast.
Yeah, and we've talked about this that Elon talks about Tesla. When you buy a car, normally it depreciates in value. But if you can do software updates, that actually means the car gets more valuable.
Hmm.
And so he likes the idea of his cars becoming more valuable because they're quote unquote getting smarter.
Yep.
So the same thing here, people don't realize like, oh, we can get better software that could actually be cheaper, which means we're lowering your cost of operations, even though, you've been a franchisee for a while. And that's a really exciting idea.
Definitely. Definitely.
Well, Neel, as always, thanks for your time.
It's great having you. Thanks, Steve.